to something that is rather concerning, actually. We're not really seeing a baby boom, are we? We're seeing quite the reverse. Official figures show the number of babies born in England and Wales dropped last year to the lowest level in 2 decades. The ONS says it follows the recent trend of decreasing live births seen before the pandemic. So joining me now is statistician and political commentator Jamie Jenkins. Jamie, thank you very much indeed for joining me. We spoke earlier about these stark figures showing that people simply aren't having enough babies potentially to replace the population.
Yeah, good afternoon, Emily. So basically what you've got is a total fertility rate number, which to replace the population, you need 2.1 births for every couple to replace the population. And that has been steadily falling now for decades. The current estimate's closer to 1.6. So what that means is over time, the number of people in Britain would fall, but what actually we have been seeing now for quite a while and increasingly in more recent years is increasing in immigration. So we're actually needing more immigration to come in because of the lack of birth, not just in the latest figures. This is something that's been going on for a long period of time, because ultimately when you got a population like the UK and other many countries across the West that are living longer, you kind of need people of that working age population to kind of do the jobs, to pay the taxes, to kind of fund looking after the older people as well. So it's a big conundrum, really. And it's not a surprise when you consider the house prices and how much they've gone up in relation to wages over the last 25 years, which means kind of tend to see couples living kind of a lot apart from each other in terms of you can't have the children as much earlier because they don't kind of get their first house until a bit later. And then women are generally having kind of their first child later as well, which means we have less children overall.
Yeah, and it is a concern, and it's actually quite sad because a lot of women, when they're polled, say they want to have children or they want to have more children, but the cost of living is often cited. Obviously, you need a partner as well, and we have more and more single people living alone in this country. So what kind of pro-natal policies, that's quite a controversial term sometimes, but what could the government be doing to enable women who do want to have children, and men as well, who want to have children, to have them? Because it's all well and good relying on immigration, but of course migrants get old too.
No, indeed. I think one of the policies that we do have is that I think child benefit only goes up to 2 children. So if you've got an average where you need to get more than, say, 2.1 children overall, some people will have 0, some will have 1, some will have more. So there's potentially a policy where you could look in terms of the child benefit system. I think ultimately, though, it comes back down to that affordability of the housing, and the successive governments now, it's not just the Conservatives, the Labour Party in the past as well. You've really got to make it affordable. So that, the other stats that the ONS publish, where you look at kind of children living with their parents, that's increasing year on year on year, because as we discussed, they can't get out of the home. And you only got to go back the ratio of earnings to house prices. So that's when you look at the average house price to earnings back in 1997 was about 3.5. In 2022 is 8.5. So the affordability for people to get on that housing ladder and then have a family is just completely out of control.
Yeah.
The government really needs to get a hold of that bit, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you very much indeed, Jamie Jenkins, their statistician and political commentator on those waning birth rates. Fraser, you and I, we're about the same age. We probably should have had kids by now.
If we were our parents' generation, then yeah, that's true. I mean, it's interesting because for decades, environmentalists were telling us that the big problem was overpopulation. There's too many people being born. It's going to starve the earth of resources, all that nonsense. Now we have the exact opposite issue. This is not just a British problem. This is a global problem. We are predicted to see a massive decrease in the global population. So even there, we're talking about immigration. How long can that plug the gap? Because it's only going to be Africa really that is going to be growing in population numbers in the coming decades. And also, the fact is that people want to have children and are not having as much children as they would like, which is kind of the opposite problem to what we've had in the past, where, it's a very good thing that we now have birth control and legal abortion, which gives people choices, allows them to decide how many children they will have, because previously they might have had too many. But now people aren't having enough, and I think the housing thing is probably critical to that.
I think there's definitely some truth to that, but of course if you partner up you'll have cheaper rent per person at least, but then there's of course maternity pay and all of that to think about, paternity and all of that, where people don't have a lot of money to keep themselves going while looking after a baby. Scarlett, something that came out of these statistics is that foreign-born mothers seem to be doing quite well in rearing children. So why would it be that British-born mothers aren't cracking on? Is this something about being in the work, more likely to be on the career ladder, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's something like a third of new babies are born to foreign mothers, which, of course, the Daily Mail did as a disaster, whereas actually without them, where would we be? I mean, I think there's a tendency, for people from certain countries, I mean, sort of South Asia, for instance, to have larger families, from Africa to have larger families. So I think, but I mean, if we go back to why aren't we doing? I mean, one of the reasons, surely, is childcare. Is women being worried that they can't actually afford to go back to work? That they'll be. So they have to think about their career. I mean, and the other is frankly the 2-child rule, which means that if anything goes wrong, you don't get any money for the third and any more children. So
I don't know why that would mean why foreign-born mothers wouldn't be so important.
No. But I'm talking about in general. I mean, foreign-born mothers, obviously, they come over here quite young and come over here and have children, and they come over here to make a life and to have a family, whereas those of us who are born here think very hard about having a family.
Well. Yeah. I think I can only speak of my demographic. But yes, 10, 20 years ago, a lot more of my friends who've pursued different things, different careers and whatnot, probably would have had more. There would be more children kicking around. And I do think it is women putting their careers much, put it at the top of their priority list, not finding a partner till much later. These are all cultural things that don't necessarily have anything to do with the cost of living or cost of housing. Yeah, and I think one cultural thing that's often overlooked is the amount of pressure there is on parents these days to be the perfect parent. So, you know, if you think about if you give an example of a woman who's a career-driven woman, she's supposed to have it all, she's supposed to have the perfect job and be the perfect parent. Parents are blamed, you know, they're told, there's all this nonsense about how the early years are critical to a child's development. You know, if you're a mother, you have to breastfeed the child constantly, you have to, you know, constant care, all this stuff, which is, I think, a bit bogus. But people feel like, you know, people have had children during world wars. People have had children during much poorer times than now. You know, relatively, even if you're struggling in London, you know, you're struggling to make ends meet, you can't afford your rent, that you're still better off than, you know, 99.9999999% of the population who have ever lived. And yet we feel that we can't, you know, we're not secure enough to have children. There's a lot of truth to that. And I think this is quite controversial, but I think probably quite a lot of middle-class people in their late 20s, early 30s probably don't want to give up some of their luxuries or niceties. So, for example, you know, taking trips when they like, or being able to spend their money on dinners out, or, luxuries like that. Yeah, I know, but then you get to 38 and you're thinking, oh, God, can I still have a kid, you know? Yes, I know. No, I mean, I was sort of the opposite, was that suddenly I got these incredible maternal urges for both my children, and I would have done anything to have, for even though the first one was a complete accident, but the second one was planned. Too much information, Scarlett. Yes, but I mean, I just think, and when young women say to me, you know, I have a really nice life, and particularly those who are married. I mean, there are so many single people who actually, and I think quite reasonably, love the opportunity. Yeah. But lots. I mean, people. You're right. I mean, married people say to me, "We have a great time." You know, we look at our friends with children and we think, well, maybe not. I just think a lot of young women are told that they need to have it all, and they're told that they need to make it up the career ladder, and then they put it off, and then, you know, it doesn't happen, which is a real shame. It is a real shame, because for a lot of people that maternal instinct does kick in, get very broody indeed.